Do you remember the video series I covered a while back that was an adaptation of the story Ted the Caver? Well, the person responsible for that adaptation, Alex Archives, is back at it again with another horror project. This time, it's an original. Hollow Bird, get excited, because in this series expect creepy illustrations, childhood trauma, insomnia, twisted experiments, monster transformations, and, get this, dinosaurs. You heard me right, dinosaurs. Don't click away, trust me, this is cool. It's in the style of found footage, of course, and we really feel for the character every step of the way as they're diving deeper into insanity and torture from a project that they were forced into at a young age. He's losing a lot of loved ones and eventually becomes the thing of his nightmares. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to spoil too much in the intro. So, obviously I recommend watching the series first because it's definitely worth the watch. I was on the edge of my seat the majority of time, so links are in the description. You'll enjoy it, I promise. However, if you already watched the series and you want to hear my recap, thoughts, and theories, or if you need more convincing, then sit back, relax, maybe get a snack, and as always, my name is Ripa Estrella. Let's explore. New teeth. Found footage. The video begins with the tape being inserted, and it opens with a message from T Chemicals clarifying that the footage will be shown is the first recorded case of a successful conversion, and the buyer's consideration is advised. We're also told that the subject is labeled Exhibit 10, but more on this later. Now finally getting to the footage, the date is November 21st, 2007, and we hear people speaking through a radio and see someone driving on the road in a heavily wooded area. The conversation was about a security guard who was found knocked out, and also about a subject who presumably is wearing a purple top. The people on the radio were then instructed to apprehend the subject and not to kill them, which was the end of their discussion, and then we see the operator of the camera's face. Our cameraman soon steps outside of their vehicle due to a locked gate blocking their path, forcing them to travel on foot, and while walking, there were moments of paranoia, specifically when he looks back assuming something was there, but after spotting nothing, they kept pushing forward, and at some point, they stumbled across another worker who was searching the area too, but that's not who he's looking for, so they continue the search on their own. And luckily, he found the subject that was mentioned earlier, the one with the purple top. They were lying on the ground seemingly motionless, and as our cameraman looked down to grab something, unexpectedly, the person vanished. Startled by this, the cameraman ran away to get some distance, and as he ran, suddenly a scream could be heard. The scream came from the other searcher that he saw earlier, and when he went back, he found them on the floor with their eyes surprisingly still open, but they weren't moving or reacting. The cameraman was clearly debating on what to do, but once he heard a strange scraping noise, it alerted him to abandon the other man and to start running again. This moment was pretty tense, but after a bit of running, our cameraman spotted the headlights to his vehicle, meaning he's safe, right? He can escape. Sadly, before he could even reach the gate, our cameraman was then grabbed from behind and raised high in the air, which caused him to drop the camera, and all we can see is a view of the vehicle and his dangling feet. We even hear him screaming before a crunching noise stopped him from making any more noises, and later he was dropped to the ground. Brutal. By the way, during this attack, we do briefly see a glimpse of the creature, but it happened too quickly and the only noticeable detail is potentially sharp teeth. But anyways, the footage soon ends with the sound of another scraping noise, almost like a boulder getting dragged on the ground. Ooh la la, keep note of that. Another thing to also keep note of is a paper that briefly flashed on screen which reads, "Where Monsters Roam, a different kind of game park." This is where the video ends and it's now takeaway time. In the beginning it mentions buyers and it also mentions successful conversions. This immediately makes me assume that there's an organization doing experiments to create creatures, and a possible way of funding these experiments is by selling them to the wealthy. This is just an initial theory, of course. Another thing I want to point out is the scraping noises we heard when the creature was around. Maybe it's because I still have the Ted caving videos in my mind, but it sounds almost like the noises we heard from that series. It honestly could just be a coincidence, but in case it's not, hold on to that possibility of this series having a potential link to that story. With that being said, let's now move on to the next segment. Log 1 through 4. The first log, which is titled Drawing, opens with a view of a person wearing yellow, and they soon sit down to obviously draw. They were extremely focused until they completed it, and once they finished, they showed the drawing to the camera, and they begin to speak. Specifically, he mentions someone named Anna, who's the person meant to receive this video, and he also goes on to criticize his own art, saying it's bad, then he explains how he's still struggling to sleep and that he loves her. This is where the video ends, and we switch to text from someone with the initial R, then we see a drawing that's number 65, and if you had the captions on, you'd see that it says property of T Chemicals. Suspicious. Now the next log video, which is titled Drawing Update. It opens with a view of the man from before who is frantically drawing another picture, and he explains to Anna that he uploaded the previous video to YouTube and got responses from people. We get shown some of the comments that he received, and later he tells Anna that he's aware that she wants updates from him, but nothing has changed. The recording also becomes very laggy during this moment, but at least the audio is still understandable. He goes on to explain that he's still convinced something is watching him, and he also mentions taking the medicine that she sent him, which apparently is helping, but drawing works the best. He soon ends the tape and we see the drawing number 56, which is pretty unsettling, but what gave me a little jump scare was the sound of knocking. Like, bro, my heart can't handle this. Anyways, next log. It's titled Old Pictures and the date is August 13th, 2007, 3 months before the events of the new teeth video. And in this video, we see the man from before and he was sent boxes filled with old belongings. To get clarification for this, he called Anna and learned that these items were sent from Nurturing Soul, their old children's home, because it was closing down and they wanted to send them back their items. Anna told him that she'll unpack the boxes later, however he said that he can do it instead, despite not having the best memories from there. So he starts to rummage through the items, basically going down memory lane while still on the call with Anna. They seem to have had a really nice chat, but eventually she had to go to work. So they ended the call and he continued unpacking alone. And at some point he found a CD which he played, but we don't see the footage that he's looking at. And at first he had a smile on his face, but suddenly he starts to panic. The more he watches, the more nervous he becomes, and eventually he calls Anna, who's still busy, but he still asks her if he saw the photos that he sent, which I'm assuming is from the footage that he saw. She told him she did, but then she starts to complain that this is the reason why she didn't want him to unpack the boxes in the first place. He then interrupts her by questioning why he doesn't remember any of it, to which she said that he dissociates. He then asked her what she remembers because she's in the photo, so she must know something. He's practically begging her for answers, but someone was calling for her, so she had to end the call. This made him rage, and the video cuts away to text from R. Please call me back could be read, and we also see a flashing image that reads, "Take a trip into the past, out of town." And before the video ends, we see a collection of photos of 2 children outside during a trip at, I believe, a theme park centered around dinosaurs. And we also see a handwritten note which says, "My son's 7th bestest birthday, October 17th, 1994. How cute! And turning to the video's captions, we can find Morse code which should read INOTAM. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Someone said it could mean it changes, or it just means I not am or I am not. But again, I don't know, so let's just put a pin on that for now until we get more information and move on to log 4, which is titled Burnt Eggs. That video opens with a tape from August 23, 2007, and we see a young man cooking some eggs, or at least he attempted to. He ended up getting distracted with a book titled Animals Can Be Almost Human, and other things which caused the eggs to be burnt. Luckily, he didn't start a fire, but it was pretty smoky and he seemed to have likely burned his palm, which sucks, but eventually he cleaned up, then he went outside with dog food to give to the neighborhood dog. Such a hungry cutie. My heart. Now fast forward to the next day, he was furiously drawing until he passed out, but it wasn't a restful sleep because after some time he abruptly woke up while yelling, and after collecting himself, he looks at the drawing he made while whispering, "Mom?" before jump cutting to him brushing his teeth. And it was bad. A lot of blood dropped down into the sink and he immediately assumed the medicine Anna gave him was to blame. He actually called her in hopes to get any answers for the potential side effects. However, she didn't pick up the phone, so he just had to leave a voicemail. And while leaving the message, he used the opportunity to also mention discovering their mother's old camera while unpacking. The camera had so many photos that brought back a lot of happy memories, but he couldn't remain happy for long while sharing past stories because he had to admit that his nightmares are becoming worse and he's seeing things. He just wants someone to talk to and pleads with her to call him back. Now it's the next day and he seems to be watching old footage in the dark, but that was a brief moment of him listening to someone singing, and as soon as that cuts away, we see drawing 58. Humming could also be heard during this, and we see the slightly ripped drawing, which is of a park, and this is where the video ends. Is there any Morse code like in the previous video? Apparently so, and according to the commenters, it should say destined to be. Creepy. So these are logs 1 through 4, and of course there's more logs, but let's stop here so I can share my quick thoughts. Clearly, this young man has issues, which could only be helped with by making drawings or by taking a certain medication. He has a sister named Anna, and they've both been in a children's home called Nurturing Souls in the past. The young man seems to be lacking specific memories from childhood and is paranoid about something watching him. Additionally, his drawings are interesting to say the least, and there's a connection between him, theme parks, and tea chemicals. Could these 2 siblings have been experimented on when they were children, or did they discover something when they were younger and they had their memories forcefully taken, or maybe it's a trauma response that's blocking their memories? Or what if Anna is responsible and she's making her brother go through these experiments since she is the one who gave him the suspicious medicine in the first place? Later we'll learn that's not the case, but whatever. In order to get more information, let's now move on to the next logs. Log 5 through 7. Log 5, which is titled A Dream, begins with a view of the young man watching videos, and the date is August 28, 2007. The purpose for making this video is so he could reach out to Anna, who hasn't been picking up any of his calls or even returning them. So with this being his only solution, he's posting the video, and he explains to her that he was doing alright, and that he's been watching a lot of Smosh videos lately. Watching those videos actually gave him the idea to start making his own videos that incorporate his drawings, and this seems to be something he really wants to do. He seems pretty happy, and maybe things are going to look up for him, but when we move on to the next log, which is titled Nightmares, things are suddenly becoming more frightening. It's the next day and we see the young man sitting in the dark while making a shushing noise before breathing heavily and frantically writing something down on a piece of paper. Something's outside. It's big. I called police. These were the first messages we saw before he had to stop. I believe he saw or heard something and he picked up the camera to search his surroundings when suddenly a scraping noise could be heard. This is when we quickly see a flash of the mysterious attacker, and it's a dinosaur. What type? I don't really know my dinosaurs, sadly, but it's a dinosaur. Anyways, the man obviously screams before the video ends, and we see a news clipping briefly flashing on screen too. On the move, huge scaly monsters have started a long, slow, and that's log 6 conclusion. Moving on to log 7, which is titled Proof, it opens with text explaining that it's been 2 days, and he hasn't been getting any sleep, and that thing is still outside of his home. Additionally, we learn that his mother's camera got destroyed in the previous video, and we also get told that the thing only comes at night, and if we want proof, he'll give us proof by fixing his mother's camera. We then move on to see footage of the young man, and the date is September 1st, 2007. He doesn't look too good, and it seems like he wanted to give his mother a message, but he soon stopped, claiming it was a stupid idea. Then the footage cuts away to him outside. He's determined to capture the beast on camera, which he knows isn't a brilliant idea and is pretty dangerous, but he can't exactly call the police again without this proof. And while waiting, he took a moment to think about his mother before lying down and passing out due to exhaustion. We then see a dark figure for a moment and hear a familiar lullaby connected to his mother before suddenly cutting away to the morning of the next day. The young man was startled awake and we could hear the sounds of something similar to shrieking in the distance, which provoked him to get up, and this is where the video ends. It's also the conclusion to all the logs, but we're not done with the series yet. Before proceeding on to the next couple of videos, I want to share another theory. Statues, specifically dinosaur statues that can move. Hear me out. We keep on hearing scraping noises, and when we do see glimpses of the beast, it looks like a dinosaur. There were even those old photos of the young man when he was a child at a theme park centered around dinosaurs, which had statues. Statues could be the monsters of the series, a frozen beast that's slowly causing chaos, kind of like a weeping angel, but of course that's not the only problem because something's also happening with the main character too. And it likely has something to do with the medicines he's taking. Actually no, it's not just that. Even before taking the medication, there was something wrong with him. Lack of sleep, paranoia, which is honestly justified based on, the recent logs, and he's having lost memories. Not only that, but these drawings that he's making, they're not just random creations. Maybe these drawings are something connected to his psyche. In order to know for certain, let's now move on to the next couple of videos. Hollow Bird, found footage. The date is September 7th, 2007, and the young man managed to get a hold of Anna. He talks about the proof he obtained, but she was more occupied by the fact that he called the police a few days ago and didn't contact her. She was worried sick and he soon lashed out, saying that she never picked up the phone. After saying that, he immediately felt bad and tried to say sorry, but she wanted to apologize too because he's right. She hasn't been around a lot, however, things will change soon because she's planning on coming home that night. Clearly she feels guilty for leaving him alone since he seemed to have made his health worse, but she'll fix it once they're together. However, this made him question if she believed him or not, and she acknowledges that his nightmares are bad, but it's not his fault and she'll help him clear his mind. Meaning she thinks he's insane. Anyways, the footage soon cuts and we see him throwing a purple shirt off to the side before putting on a jacket and telling the camera about his plans. He's going to follow the beast in order to figure out its origins, and once he has everything on camera, he's going straight to the police. He also confesses that the thing is what killed his mother, and he remembers what happened. Those yellow eyes staring at him through the window and in his nightmares, it's his monster. And as nighttime arrives, we hear the sounds of familiar scraping noises, and the man of course follows its tracks. It was a pretty long walk, and strange noises could be heard all around him before eventually he stumbles across the rear end of a dinosaur statue, and unexpectedly, his phone starts to ring. Being in a dangerous situation, he of course runs away until he gets far enough, and once his phone rings again, he finally picks it up, and it was Anna. He excitedly tells her that he caught his nightmares on camera, but she interrupts, wanting to know where he's at, while explaining that there's something outside of the house with yellow eyes. The young man didn't want to believe what he was hearing, but soon glass could be heard shattering, and it was followed by Anna screaming. This is where their call ends, and another strange noise could be heard near our protagonist. It almost sounded like growling noises, which was soon followed by scraping noises, and as our protagonist begins to run away, looking back he could see a large creature with sharp teeth. It's a dinosaur. Anyways, he somehow managed to get away, and luckily he found another person in the area who he begs them to call for help for his sister. However, this wasn't a good person because as soon as he got too close, he was knocked out by that man, and the video ends. And coincidentally, the person is wearing the same uniform that we saw from the search team in the beginning of the story. Suspicious. There's also apparently Morse code in this video, and according to the commenters, it translates to the monster. And if we were to take the other Morse code messages and put them together, it should read, I am not destined to be the monster. Or, I not am destined to be the monster, but I don't know if that makes sense. Additionally, thanks to the description, we know what the T stands for in T chemicals. It's Thricon or Tricon. Yeah. Anyways, this is the conclusion to the video, and with how it ends, our protagonist obviously witnessed something that he shouldn't have, and he's being taken away by those people. And this could be the reason behind the events of the first video. He will soon be experimented on because potentially he's a good subject for whatever they're doing, and he's going to become a beast. But in order to find out, let's now move on to the next video. Schrodinger's Monster, Hollow Bird. The video opens with the tape being inserted, and there's a warning telling us that the footage contains disturbing materials that might be inappropriate for certain audiences, so you have been advised. Now we go on to see the footage, however the disc corrupts, and later we get shown another warning. The footage is copyrighted, only meant to be seen by buyers, and we also get clarification of what a buyer is exactly. They're benefactors of the SCT project. With that being said, we now move on to see a collection of recordings in which we listen to the first one. It's a conversation between a woman named Shelly and our protagonist. She tells him that she's here to help, but he doesn't seem to believe her, so she then proceeds to talk about his sister, which he quickly asks if she's okay. According to Shelly, she's fine, and then she goes on to explain that the police found him passed out in a bush outside of his home, which he denied because he didn't pass out rather than he was knocked out. By whom? He doesn't exactly remember. We then see an image of his injured face, and the conversation continues with Shelly mentioning that he ran at some point and she wanted to know if he remembers what he was running away from. According to the police, he said dinosaurs, but he quickly corrected her and said monsters. He was running away from monsters. This made her smile in response, which made him mad because it seemed like she didn't believe him, so he pointed out the fact that he had a camera that filmed everything. Sadly, the police didn't find a camera on the scene, which made him distraught and question if someone took it. To calm him down, she explains there's a chance that the camera will pop up eventually. Then she asks another question, but first she points out that once he was found, it was discovered that he had severe symptoms of sleep deprivation. She wanted to know why he was like that, and he told her that he has nightmares. He struggles to sleep because of this, and after answering that question, their interview ended. And because the police are still continuing with their investigation, he will have to remain in that place for a few more days, which made him ask about his sister again. Shelly admits that Anna has serious injuries and is under medical supervision, but eventually he'll be able to visit her, and this is the conclusion to the first recording. Moving on to the next recording, it's of a man named Homer Stoop, and the date is July 31st, 1993. Sadly, the audio is a bit distorted, but we were still able to hear his words. And it starts off with a very interesting line. The soul. That's why I'm here. Your company isn't afraid of moral repercussions, my research would entail. He then says that's besides the point, and he's sure that the person he's speaking to is curious because why else would they ask for him? They seek knowledge and wisdom, which he did similarly, but first he wants his wishes met. This is where the audio corrupts and we move on to the next recording. Shelly is back talking to our protagonist, and she mentions that the police found his drawings in his home. She wants to know more about them, but he just blankly said that they're just drawings. She wanted more clarification, however, so he specifies that they're his nightmares. She then asked if they were the same things he was running away from during the incident, to which he said yes. However, he specified that they weren't just nightmares this time, they were actually real. Shelly responded dismissively, to which our protagonist says that they have to be real because who else attacked his sister? Shelly responded by saying the police are still trying to figure that out, and he wanted to know if his camera was found yet, but it wasn't. He then asked if he could finally see his sister, but sadly he has to wait 2 to 3 more days before Anna can accept visitors because she's struggling to cope and is still healing. Our protagonist then starts to blame himself, saying that she just wanted to help and that he should have been there. Shelly then asked where he was, to which he didn't respond, so she moves on to the next question. She asks if he saw those monsters while he was awake, to which he said yes, and reiterates that he filmed the incident. Shelly just gave him a short response before thanking him for his time and telling him that he's a good brother before ending the interview. The audio then corrupts and we get taken back to the recording from the man named Homer. He says that adult trials won't work because all they'll get is empty shells living off a core desire at best. They have to think younger, conversion as they grow so something can stabilize during adulthood. He then mentions writing a proposal and needing someone to approve it. Now stepping away from that recording, we move on to another one. It opens with our protagonist stating the fact that 4 days have passed and he wants to see his sister, but there's a few more final questions that need to be answered before the two can go home. Our protagonist accepts it begrudgingly, but still wants to know if Anna is okay, to which Shelly praises him for caring about his sister so much. She's all he has, so of course he cares about her. Then Shelly questions him about what happened to his parents. He answers by saying it was just him, Anna, and their mother growing up, but he struggled to answer what happened to his mother, so to raise the mood, Shelly mentioned that they found his mother's camera and they need to fix it to recover the footage, so they'll see it soon. This of course was exciting news for our protagonist, then Shelly tells him to rest up because tomorrow is going to be a big day. How ominous. And just like before, the audio corrupts and we return back to Homer. The date is October 16th, 1994, and the man is crashing out, saying no repeatedly and saying that she can't pull the plug because of motherly instincts. He's gone too far and he claims that if her children knew what she's done, she would be seen as a monster. Luckily, he has a plan, but before we get to hear it, we cut away to another audio recording. Shelly asks how the protagonist is feeling, to which he says fine. However, that wasn't the reaction she expected, because he'll soon be seeing his sister. The reason why our protagonist is preoccupied in his thoughts is because he's still thinking about his mother mother's camera. Speaking of which, the contents from the camera was recovered, which made our protagonist feel relieved because it means they saw the monsters. Shelley responded by saying that they indeed saw a monster, and later she questions him about the photos from his childhood, the ones from the theme park. Our protagonist asked her where she found those, to which she said that they were in the camera. However, he rejected that they were there, to which Shelley didn't change her statement. She asks about the photo once again, pointing out the fact that him and his sister are standing next to dinosaur statues, to which our protagonist argues that they're not statues, but monsters. Shelley rejects that notion and points out the fact that he was found severely sleep-deprived, likely hallucinating the dinosaur statues, and as he starts to question his sister's whereabouts, Shelley admits to him that Anna is dead. Our protagonist obviously doesn't want to believe it, and Shelley starts to explain that the combination of his nightmares and lack of sleep made him dissociate, and that he killed his sister. The only monster is him. The recording then ends, and we get taken back to Homer to hear his final message. The date is August 12, 2007, and he's talking to Shelley about DNA trials, but first there's another step that needs to be prioritized. To convert a soul, the psyche needs to be broken. His image soon changes to one of a dinosaur, and the video concludes. What the? That's a whole lot of information that's extremely fascinating, but let's now move on to the final video before we start talking about my theories in the conclusion. Let's go. Patient 10, Hollow Birds. The video opens with a warning, so you've been advised. Then we see text that mentions the events that happened between September to November 2007. We then see a file from T Chemicals, specifically on Project SCT, which is being led by Homer and who I believe is Shelley as well. As for the information on their patient, it just says 10, and the most interesting thing to take note of from this file is the associated company, Nurturing S. And if you're questioning why that sounds familiar, that's because that's the children's home that our protagonist went to as a child, Nurturing Souls. More on this later, because now we're going to be presented with the Walton files. Specifically, it's a recording from Shelley, who's talking about Patient 10, and the date is September 2007. Patient 10 is obviously our protagonist, and we see footage of him curled in a ball as she starts listing off information about him. One specific thing she states is that his mental and physical condition allowed for an easy transfer, and she verifies her identity as a scientist and researcher for the program. Her responsibility is to monitor, document, and collect samples from Patient 10, and to administer the Apilo DNA that was provided by Homer. Additionally, she states the fact that no one is able to go past pyridization sickness, and Patient 10 is the only deviant because of his orthodox preparation. Regardless, time is still ticking and she begins the genetic procedure. Fast forward to a week later, she lists off information about his physical changes and explains that he's now transgenic in nature and has a high rate of stabilization because of the combination of previous medications and Homer's extracted cells. By the way, the definition of transgenics means an organism that has had its DNA altered by introducing foreign DNA from another species. But back to the recording, Shelley shares that their goal is to increase the success rate of the program, but one problem keeps getting in their way: pyridization sickness. Patient 10 at the moment is withdrawn and placed in solitary confinement, and no symptoms have developed as of yet, but he's still going to be monitored and they're going to look out for mutations. And before ending the day's recording, Shelley said something interesting about another patient, or technically she refers to her as Exhibit 6. Exhibit 6 was meant to be terminated, but it was halted due to her link with Patient 10. More on this later because I definitely have thoughts on this. We then see footage of our protagonist once again, but with his head against his knees, and humming could be heard in the background, likely coming from him. Now back to Shelley. 2 weeks have passed, and just like before, she states the physical changes of our protagonist, then explains that the symptoms from the sickness have started to develop within him. His mass and height have increased while his skin is becoming paler due to decreased blood flow. Shelley then explains the process further, but it's pretty complicated, so I'm not going to attempt to summarize it. But what I do understand is when she mentions the process is extremely painful for humans and can make patients act violently. This concludes the recording for that day, and then we see footage of our protagonist once again, but the room was pretty dark, so we couldn't exactly see him. That is, until we see glowing eyes. Shelley was shown the surveillance footage, and obviously a mutation was discovered. Patient 10 has now a reflective layer of tissue that helps him see in low lighting. Humans don't have this, so the fact that he does is exciting. However, it will leave his eyes sensitive to brightness, and samples will need to be taken, which is ugh. As for his sickness, it's continuing to spread. There's pyrite piercing his skin, and she estimates that within 2 weeks his body will be fully petrified, like a statue. She'll try to remove as much growth as she can, but it's just a matter of time before she has to draft up Patient 10's exhibit files. That was the end of that day's recording, but unexpectedly we hear the process of his growths being removed, and it sounds like the most painful thing in the world! They're basically sawing these pieces off of him. Go check out that scream, honestly, it's brutal. But anyways, another week has passed, and Homer requested for Shelley to make clarification statements, specifically to clarify the petrification process and what it means. You see, once a living organism is fully petrified, it's still alive, and they'll continue to grow until they reach the size of whatever organism whose DNA they received. As for what samples our protagonist was given, Shelley actually doesn't know. At this point, she'll have to wait for our protagonist to change physically to find out because Homer gives her different DNA samples each time. She can't exactly estimate which one she was given. The only thing Shelley knows for certain is that Homer's DNA is ancient. Also, I will not lie, for a moment I thought she said Homer was the one giving the protagonist his own DNA, but I think I just misinterpreted her words. When she says his DNA, I believe she means the DNA that he has on hand, not his actual own DNA. Regardless, it's still alarming that she doesn't know what dinosaur she'll get until the person grows. More on this later because Shelley soon explains that Homer believes a way to work around obstacles like that sickness is through the human soul. However, she argues that they're dealing with science, not feelings. Despite not believing Homer's theories, she still did the questioning that was requested of her with patient 10, our protagonist. First, she asks how he was feeling, to which he didn't respond, so she asks about his mother, but still didn't get a response. This seemed to have frustrated her, and she starts to explain how they had high hopes for him. It took a lot of efforts just to get him there, and she states how Homer, herself, his mother, and his sister wanted him to succeed, but he's just another failure. Bruh, she's taunting the poor man! She then starts talking about the item next to him, which is made of the same materials that's growing within his body, and its origins actually come from a specific triceratops. She then tells him that that triceratops was destroyed that night because it stopped one of their exhibits from harming him. He could have saved her, but he just had to go out that night and left her to die. By the way, saying this right now, I believe the Triceratops is the protagonist's mother. Oof. Anyways, Shelley continues to taunt our protagonist, which provoked him to start moving forward, and she tells him that he can either die pathetically from the sickness, or he can be something much more. That was the end of their questioning, and Shelley makes another solo recording stating that patient 10 will be isolated until the final stage of his sickness. His file will be archived and his exhibit status will be finalized based on his genotype. She then says that this was unfortunate because they were hoping for a breakthrough, but Homer's knowledge failed them, and he just created a broken boy who thinks he's a monster. We then see footage of our protagonist one last time, and unexpectedly, he was extremely close to the camera. Being this close, we can see his sharp teeth, and he clearly doesn't look normal. The camera then cuts to static, likely because it was destroyed, and later we switch to footage of someone running, and an alarm could be heard in the background. The date is November 20th, 2007, and I believe the person recording is Shelley. She's panicking while mumbling that he broke out of containment, and that he killed the guards. She sounds scared, but she also sounds excited, because she then starts to say that it worked. That the project worked. This is when a noise could be heard behind her, and when she looks back, we see our protagonist slowly pulling the door open before aggressively lunging forward. Blood then sprays on the camera before that video ends, and we do see a frame of our protagonist. And boy, how frightening, but really cool. Look, I'm not a monster fricker, but hear me out. I'm joking. Okay, let's now move on to the conclusion before you all assume I'm a freak. Conclusion. This story is a tragic telling of twisted experiments and a family of 3, a mother, a daughter, and a son. And based on the recordings from Homer, we can assume that the mother allowed her children to be used for the experiments revolving around transgenics, the study that introduces DNA from one species to another. Additionally, the mother was either a random volunteer for the program, or she was a researcher who was willing to take one for the team, however she ends up getting too attached to her children, because of course, and wanted to pull out. And if she wasn't a researcher, maybe she didn't know the full extent of the project, but got a gut feeling telling her to back out. However, Homer, one of the lead researchers, and who I doubt is human and is actually an ancient creature, did not let that slide. They somehow got the mother out of the picture and likely turned her into a triceratops, and this whole situation obviously connects to our protagonist's trauma, and is likely what caused his memory problems along with a bunch of other issues. He knows that a monster was responsible for his mother's demise, and if I had to guess, he either witnessed her transform, or Homer, that creepy creature man, was the one to get to her, or an exhibit was sent out to deal with her. By the way, did we ever once get told the main character's name? Did I just miss it, or has it just never been stated? We did see the initial R, so maybe that's a connection? Regardless, our protagonist is traumatized. Looking at dinosaur statues will never be the same for him ever again, and while growing up, his mental health is going down the drain. Since his mother's quote-unquote passing, he has to grow up in a child's home with his sister called Nurturing Souls, which is terrible because that home is associated with the company for the Dinosaur weird project. Speaking of that project, Homer makes an emphasis on the human soul, and the reason why they had to start younger is because they're getting nowhere with adults. So by starting younger, they can immediately begin with the whole soul manipulation process. They purposely break this boy down from a young age, ripping him away from his mother and making him go insane due to nightmares and lack of sleep that's making him dissociate. As for why they're triggering negative emotions, if I had to guess, by breaking him completely until he eventually goes numb to all forms of suffering, it makes transforming go easy for him because he already suffered far too much that he doesn't even care about the pain his body is going through. Growing fast, having pieces sawed off of him, that's a piece of cake. By growing numb to it all, it allows him to have resistance to becoming fully petrified because the trauma slows the sickness. Also, real quick, I want to apologize to Anna because I literally suspected her of being in on it since she gave him medicine that made him bleed from the mouth. However, she was actually just a good sister who ended up getting hit in the crossfire, and medicines can be a complicated story for a lot of people, so she probably didn't know that whatever she recommended him would do more harm than good, so yeah, sorry. Anyways, before our protagonist got captured, he had a sense of being stalked, and after looking through his old belongings, it made him want to figure out what's happening around him. As for who's stalking him, it's obviously the people responsible for the experiments, and I also think his mother is stalking him too. As mentioned before, she was somehow petrified and turned into a triceratops. And at night, I guess these statues or exhibits can move, so she visits her children to protect them. What our protagonist thinks is stalking and potentially wanting to hunt down is actually just her trying to keep a watchful eye out for their home and to protect them. As long as the siblings were under the same roof, she could easily act as their guard. Sadly, one night, the protagonist wanders outside because he wants to film evidence of these monsters, so the mother had to make a choice to protect him, and it sadly ended with the daughter dying since she was left alone in the house without any protection, meaning her death was technically the protagonist's fault. Ugh. Also, I believe the mother is still around despite what Shelley told our protagonist. The reason why I said this is because of that earlier recording of Shelley saying that she was not terminated because she had a link to our protagonist. So I think that the mother Triceratops statue is still being kept, but is just somewhere hidden away. And the only reason why Shelley told our protagonist that she died is because she just wanted to break the camel's back. The point of the experiment is to make him suffer as much as possible, so by telling him that she died a second time and he's to blame for it, it was pretty effective. Experiments that fail lead to full body petrification, while experiments that succeed lead to creating a dinosaur-human hybrid, which is what our protagonist turned into. And whatever DNA he was given, it's clearly something very dangerous and strong since he easily broke out of containment. And for some reason, a part of me believes the DNA he received is, for some reason, Homer's DNA? But I could be wrong. I don't really have any proof for that assumption besides the fact that Homer is obviously not human and has taken a great interest in our protagonist. By the way, in the very first video, New Teeth, the events that happened were a day after the security breach, so the person in the purple top that we saw could be our protagonist, but a part of me, oddly enough, doesn't think it's him. He's wearing a yellow shirt after all, and sure, he could have just changed, but why bother if he's turning into a beast? So maybe that person is another kid who grew up similarly to our protagonist? I don't have any evidence that would point me to that assumption, and the reason why I believe this is because why would they put all their eggs in one basket? Humans take a long time to grow up, obviously, so why would they do this experiment on one kid if they could do it on multiple? So it's not that hard to believe that there's a chance another kid was dragged into that experiment alongside our main character. There was a children's home, so maybe all the kids that were there were used for the project. Maybe. Who knows? Another thing we don't know for certain is the goal behind the whole project. I have ideas, but I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, they're trying to mix DNA with two species together, but why dinosaurs and humans? If I had to guess, it's because dinosaurs in the past were the top dogs in the food chain, while in the present day, humans are at the top of the food chain. So by mixing the two species together, not only are they making something new, but also a species that can surpass everything. And since Homer is not human, maybe the project is his way of trying to not be the only one left of his dinosaur species. But that makes him sound sympathetic, and for all we know, this guy could just be straight up evil. He does torture children after all. Anyways, this is the whole series so far. Will there be more? Hope so, because I'm invested. I want to know more about the project. I want to know if there's any more successful experiments of anyone else who went through what the protagonist went through. I also want to know if the sister is actually dead or alive or not, because a part of me thinks she's still alive, but that could be wishful thinking because, I don't want the protagonist to be alone. And lastly, I want to know what will happen to our protagonist. Obviously, he went through a massive change deep down. Is he still himself or something else? Does he have to fight against animalistic urges? And will he still be our protagonist in the future videos? Or are we going to switch to someone else's perspective? Whatever happens, I can't wait because I know it's going to be great. And the visuals, ooh, they're sick. They're cool. My eyes were literally glued to the screen. Alex, bro, how dare you be so cool? Just like with your Ted the Caver series, you got me at the edge of my seat. And the final video is it's going to stick with me for a long time. Something about watching a human turn into a monster and go crazy on people who deserve it, it's just, ooh, it's so satisfying. I beg for more, but I will be patient because I hate rushing people. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and the link to Alex's channel is in the description if you want to check out the series yourself. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, do that funny little notification thing, maybe follow my other social medias, leave a comment, and I better not catch you dying on me. Goodbye!